F Scott Fitzgerald introduces the narrator of the story, Nick, who tells the reader that while he is from a privileged background, he has been brought up by his father to be non-judgmental and tolerant of others, especially of those who have not been so fortunate as him. Fitzgerald here immediately introduces the theme of social class and shows us exactly where Nick fits into this social system. Nick then tells the reader that he became known at college as someone who is sought out as a person of trust, someone who others can tell their wildest and darkest secrets to without the risk of being judged. However, this was something he avoided as much as he could because he found that young men's recounts of the events in their lives are often unreliable, with key points being left out of a person's narrative, and it becomes difficult to know what to believe. We are left with the impression that Nick does not seek out drama, rather, men seek him out because he is reliable and can be trusted by others. What is interesting is that he himself has become the man who is unloading a secret to us. Fitzgerald is raising a question mark in the reader's mind here as to whether Nick himself is going to be reliable while he narrates the story. We are all emotionally invested in what goes on around us. The people who tell Nick their stories and Nick himself are not immune to bias. No one is, including the readers. Nick's reliability is questioned further towards the end of chapter 1 when Daisy asks him about gossip she has heard, that he is engaged. Nick had initially stated that the reason he moved to New York is to take on a new job. It is only Daisy's nudge that reveals that this is not the only reason. This highlights to the reader that Nick is not entirely reliable. He is flawed. As the novel progresses, we come to see that every character is flawed, regardless of their upbringing. Nick reinforces a moral attitude and an attitude of tolerance by saying that he agrees with his father's thinking that some people are born with higher morals and more decency than others. But he has a limit, and it doesn't matter how pitiful a person's upbringing might be, there is only so much bad behaviour that he is prepared to accept. Fitzgerald here is starting to prepare the reader for the flashback, the story Nick is about to tell. He hooks us by creating a sense of anticipation. Nick is a man who has heard all sorts of wild stories from a wide range of men, but the story he is about to tell tops them all. Nick's moral outrage arouses our curiosity. We want to know what could have happened that was so bad. How he talks about Gatsby intrigues us further. For a start, we are enticed by contradictory, vague and abstract descriptions. And then Nick establishes that Gatsby has been a victim of something terrible. The reader wants to hear what has happened so they can form their own judgment. Catharsis is a Greek word meaning the release of emotions. Catharsis in storytelling is often irresistible. Humans often enjoy feeling moral outrage when hearing of injustice and wrongdoing. Writing the story is cathartic for Nick, and Fitzgerald here urges us to read on and feel catharsis too. Finally, Nick starts to tell his story, explaining his motivations for moving to New York from Minnesota in the Midwest. He drops in a few more social clues that allow us to understand his privileged background further. His family are respected and well known, and he attended Yale. While he moves to West Egg in Long Island, just 20 miles east of New York City, he is sure to separate himself from the setting and its inhabitants. He wants to make it clear that while he is from a wealthy and noteworthy family, his house in West Egg is modest and humble and in direct contrast to the other houses in the neighbourhood. He also refers to the community itself as strange, which again creates intrigue in the reader, especially because he also refers to them as being millionaires. We are fed more tantalising scraps of information about a group of people that we do not generally have access to and who can be quite fascinating to us. Nick is related to Daisy Buchanan, who lives just over the bay in East Egg, an even more exclusive and fashionable neighbourhood than West Egg. Nick knows her husband Tom from Yale and tells us that Tom is from Chicago and an enormously wealthy family that sets him at the top of the pecking order in terms of social status. Tom thrives on his high status and highly masculine qualities. These are traits that are admired by other college boys in Yale, but now that he has become an adult, he cannot rely on them entirely anymore. In his life he has peaked too soon, and now at 30 he feels a restless longing for his college days. Tom is no longer at the top of his game, but he is still physically dominant, and this is reflected in his description, which has overtones of superiority, aggression, and violence. We see that he is used to being in control of others through how he uses his own body. Tom welcomes control as a given right because of his physical presence and as a member of the elite. His greatest fear is that his social control may be weakened in the future. Tom fears the rise of multiculturalism and modernism in the US at the time. He feels threatened by change because this could affect the current status quo and therefore his position at the top of the tree. His fears are dismissed when Daisy makes fun of him, and his concentration when thinking over the matter is described by Nick as pathetic. Where Tom controls with physical actions, Daisy controls with her voice. Nick finds Daisy to be utterly charming, but even though they are related, they do not know each other well, and Nick finds it difficult to read Daisy's motivations. Where Tom is very physical and concrete, with Fitzgerald using more concrete nouns to describe him, Daisy is more abstract and difficult to define. Descriptions of her are often contradictory, and she seems to project multiple personas that are confusing for Nick and the reader. What is clear is the distress she feels from her husband's affair and his mistress calling on the telephone during dinner. At times she appears to despise him, and the tension between them is evident. However, there are times when Fitzgerald suggests there is an indestructible bond between her and Tom that separates the two of them from everyone else. Jordan Baker's behaviour with her chin up and nose in the air portrays her as an upper-class snob, and where Daisy exudes warmth, Jordan is cold and distant. Descriptions make her almost like a marble statue at times. Daisy reveals that Jordan grew up in Louisville like her, and they knew each other in childhood. Jordan is a part of the elite, and she effuses the same discontent as Tom and Daisy, yet she is set apart from them because she is a professional golfer, and so she travels and is much more independent in comparison with Daisy and other women of their class, whose main purpose is to get married, produce children and increase their status. Jordan's behaviour, which is modern, and a rejection of this, is frowned upon by Tom, but is compelling for Nick, who realises that he has seen her before in magazines and knows a little bit about her already from reading about her life. J. Gatsby is first described by Nick before he goes on to tell the story of which he is at the centre. We get a sense that he is difficult to define and is more like an abstract idea than a character. When he explains what draws him to Gatsby, Nick uses metaphorical language and imagery as opposed to concrete nouns. This sets Gatsby at the opposite end of the spectrum to Tom, who is very physical and concrete. Nick compares Gatsby to a seismograph, and it seems that Gatsby is tuned in to how to get the most out of life, in a good way. Nick feels that Gatsby is unique. He will never meet anyone like him again. He represents abstract ideals, promise, hope, and readiness to commit. Despite this, Nick also tells us that Gatsby represents something very negative that he feels disgust for, and the reader wants to find out for themselves exactly what Gatsby is like. At the end of chapter 1, Nick's first glimpse of Gatsby after he has commenced the story captures him in a poetic and mysterious language and imagery. We are introduced to the symbolism of the green light, and rather than answering some of the questions the reader already has about Gatsby, Fitzgerald develops the enigmatic quality of Gatsby even further. We are left wondering who he is and what awful fate he has in store for him. Please consider liking or subscribing if you got something out of this video, or if you would like more Gatsby related content. Thank you.